little
The
bit of a thing.
mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
The information in the podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please talk to a medical professional before doing anything that may impact your health.
Hey guys, I'm Joey Suit. Welcome to my podcast, to Mike One Joey Suit. Before I give my mic to, how do you want, Rick Nash?
Rick J. Nash is fine.
He had hepatitis C and a transplant patient. Hepatitis C is an infection that is caused by a virus that attacks the liver and leads to inflammation. You can get it from contaminated blood, from sharing needles, or on a sterile tattoo gun, but maybe he had a different story. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, yeah, actually, I have a very unique story into why I actually have hepatitis C. I am one of the now 4%, used to be about 1%, but now it's 4%, who get it through something called vertical transmission or mother to child. So I was actually born with it. It was not Maybelline.
Wait, so your mom had it?
Mm-hmm. She was cured in 2011 on her third treatment.
So your mom had it, but didn't know she had it, or how did that work?
Mm-hmm. So what happened was sometime in the early 80s, she likely contracted it while working in being as a dental assistant in dental surgery in the Castro, and she noticed that she had basically a jaundice reaction and what she thought was hepatitis A at the time, and so it just passed and there was nothing about it, and she didn't think anything of it until like 18 years later when when I turned. Like I was like 12 years old, and I peed a weird color, and we went. My dad was like, "All right, this is weird." So we went to the hospital. We checked it out. They were like, "Well, let's check a few things here. We'll run some tests." And the test didn't come out conclusive, so they're like, "Let's run some biopsies." So they biopsied my liver, my kidney, my spleen, because they were like, "Well, it's bleeding in the urine, so let's figure it out." And they figured out, well, it's hepatitis C. And they said, well, a 12-year-old having hepatitis C is weird because of all the things you mentioned before. How does a 12-year-old get it? And the answer is through vertical transmission. And so they tested everyone in my family. And of course, my dad, my brother were clear, but my mom was not. So it was a very troubling moment, because when you get that kind of diagnosis, it's, you don't really know what to do with that, especially when you're 12. And you're like, all right, cool. So, I've got till about my guy was pretty simple. My doctor was like, you got about till about 30, or you're going to need a liver transplant, or you're going to die. So there's one of those two. And you're probably not going to get the transplant. I didn't realize how easy that is to happen. And well, here I am. But long story short, I got it from my mom. She got cured in 2011 on her third treatment. So it was very good for her.
Did you have any symptoms of hepatitis C growing up, or it came out of the blue?
Kind of. So hepatitis C is a weird disease in that it's people call it, it's a silent disease, in the fact that it's a very, very long, slow acting one. And so in my case, the reason why I was found out was because I was 12 and I happened to experience a symptom by random chance. I was drinking lots of sugary drinks that day and not really drinking much water, and I was running around, so I was very dehydrated. So my body was pushed to the point where it expressed those symptoms. And what they determined was that, maybe we shouldn't do that anymore because you might express more. So I was taken out of PE, a whole bunch of other stuff was going on, which was a whole another debacle too, because it was hepatitis C. So they were like, and the news about Pamela Anderson had come out at the time. So people were aware somewhat of what hepatitis C was, in the fact that they should be afraid of it and they shouldn't go near it. So when my dad was like, hey, so my kid has this, they were like, let's pull him out of everything we can. So tricky thing, because the stigma around it was like also double challenging.
But it's not contagious, is it?
So it is a contagious disease, but how it works is it is a blood-borne pathogen, which means it can only be transmitted via blood. And so that's why, as you mentioned before, we're talking about, unsterile tattoo needles, unsterilized things like that. We're talking the same thing with Coke straws is actually a more common one that people realize. Same thing with kits and other tools, cotton, from any kind of drug, any kind of intravenous drug use. Those are always there because anytime you think about blood interacting, that's when you're going to have it, when you're going to have the possibility of hepatitis C. And so The biggest one for most folks is actually, or was for a long time, transfusions and medical operations, because we really didn't test for it until the 90s. And so the blood supply was not really tested until like 1992. And that was for, they started just doing bloodborne pathogen tests for a lot of things, not just hepatitis C, but hepatitis B and HIV as well. So they just kind of lumped it all together and we're like, maybe we should look at this because people seem to be getting sick. So they figured it out. So that big route was closed in 1992. So we haven't had a lot of new cases from that. So almost all of our new cases are generally from one of two things. Generally from some type of drug use, because of either, again, like I said, Coke, where the nose is sharing, so you have blood on the straw or on the tool being used, or intravenously, so they have stuff like that. Or this is a weird one that's new, that they are actually intentionally giving people hepatitis C, which is awkward. I'll explain. So a really cool thing that's kind of happened in the past few years is that hepatitis C is curable. And so rarely does this happen with a virus that we can just straight up get rid of it. So what that means is that in the past, organ donors who've had hepatitis C have only been able to be given to other hepatitis C patients. So if a patient with hepatitis C is on the transplant list and a patient dies with hepatitis C, that liver can be given to them. However, what they've noted is that the number of people with hepatitis C who are dying, who have a perfectly good liver still, is higher than the number of people who can receive it. And so what they've done is they realized, wait a second, we can just give people this hepatitis C infected liver and then give them the treatment right afterward. They're cured of hepatitis C. They have a new liver, because the thing is, they're going to die if they don't have a liver transplant. And so this is giving them a viable liver. They just have to treat the hepatitis C. So it's actually a really weird thing that we're actually able to do now. And that's something that was never possible before these treatments were available. So it creates this unique scenario that doesn't count in all the numbers that we always look at, but it's just a neat little weird thing that just can happen now.
I'm surprised like someone came up with the idea to do that.
Hey, organ donation is one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of like figuring out the rate, especially with kidneys right now, because of the massive backlog. We're talking, years upon years for waits for kidneys unless you have a living donor.
So my question to you is, so you were at 12, you got hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got hepatitis C since you were born, right, basically? And then you were diagnosed at 12. And so what happened after 12 then?
So what happened after 12 was I basically watched my mom go through several of the like early treatments, which are terrible, genuinely terrible. It was interferon injections, which interferon is something your body naturally produces when you get sick. So whenever you get sick, that's the same kind of thing interferon is. But the difference is that this is interferon alpha. So basically when they're shooting that in you, or when you're rather shooting it in your leg or arm or body, wherever it's going, it basically amplifies your kind of immune reaction by like about 100 times. So you feel the sickest you have ever felt. And you feel it for about 3 to 6 months, depending upon how it was. So my mom went through that. And then they fixed it so that you didn't have to stab yourself 3 times a week and just once a week, which was nice. Because every injection site that you put it into, it would kind of kill all the cells around it. So you'd have a little dead spot. Not great, not gonna lie. It was very painful. But you get over it, because at the end of the day, it's that or death. So you keep going.
It's either death or, living with the dent in your skin.
Yeah, a few. They go away over time because for me, you're injecting it into fat for the most part. And so the reason why it kind of reacts that way is I guess something to do with the fat cells, but they regenerate over time. But you just have weird, usually like a vein or two will end up breaking in the process. And so you'll end up having like weird spider veins around the area. That's happened to me. It happened to my mom. It happened to a few of my colleagues who've also had it. So it's not always there, but it can happen. It's just the risk of when you're injecting into an area blind and not knowing where veins are,
So you have to inject into a vein, or you just put it like in your thigh?
You just put it in your thigh. But if you miss and you hit a vein, it hurts. So, yeah. So I did that a few times.
Must be, I don't know. It's like, you must like maybe not hate your mom, but like, your mom like gave you something, but I guess in the the silver lining that you will be able to be cured. So my question is to you, how did the transplant, are you cured from hepatitis C, or do you need a transplant? Like, I'm confused with that connection.
So it's a long story, but this is how it works. So I've been on a total of 6 different treatments for this. I have a unique variant strain. And so what happens for me is that when they tried the first treatments, they didn't work, and they found out that I had what's called a Q A to K polymorphism. And what that means is that basically how the treatments work is they target these non-structural proteins. I also work in biopharma, so I'm familiar with all this stuff too. And I also learned it during the time period because, well, I needed to know how I was going to get cured, and really nobody was telling me. So you figure it out on your own, I guess. It's what you do, right? Patient advocacy. And
yeah,
so
talk to us like we're 5 though. So like,
yeah. All right. So what we had here is basically I went through all the different treatments, and they didn't work. And so in 2015, end of 2015, we found that maybe this combination therapy could work. But the problem was I became what's called too sick to treat. In 2016, my Meld score was such that I couldn't, and so I had to have a liver transplant to not for me to not die, because my end stage liver disease was so bad. I'd been in end stage liver disease for about 6 years. So about from the age of about 18 to 22, I had what I consider like a somewhat normal, typical kind of life-ish, just a little bit hampered by the ability to kind of go out and maybe necessarily I'd be fatigued a lot easier. But other than that, it was not a huge noticeable difference until about 22, and then suddenly it just went terrible. It just went all bad real quick. From 22 to 24, I went from F2 to F4. The F4 is the most extreme liver damage you can have, and it goes into what's called the Model for End Stage Liver Disease score. And so I was given a 14, which is a low number, but that's where you start. And so,
wait, were you given so you got hepatitis C? Were you given like guidelines of like, look out for this thing? Like, was it everything always associated with hepatitis C, or did kind of like you had a new problem and you kind of had to like connect the dots again? Or
I was lucky in that, realistically, because I was diagnosed so early, I really took a lot of precautions to safeguard my health as much as possible. Obviously, while I was a kid, I made really dumb choices, but once I turned about 19, I kind of stopped doing that as much. Drinking a lot of Pepsi all day,
I'm like, what do you have to do differently with hepatitis C?
With hepatitis C, it's just a little bit of a liver diet change. So the idea is that your liver is the filter organ for your body, which means that when you have hepatitis C, once you hit F1, the second you got that F1, you need to change your diet, generally speaking, because your liver is now encumbered, and so your liver.
How do you know where F you are on?
So how is through a blood test and fiber scan or a ultrasound. And so they go in there and they basically look around your liver and look for cirrhotic or fibrosis. If you have levels of fibrosis or cirrhosis or necrotizing tissue, those are typically more like F2, F3. But the beginning, that fibrosis is really just F1 there. Just a little bit of fibrosis, because that means that your liver is basically becoming fibrous. So it's becoming very, very tense. And so it can't filter as easily. You know what I mean? So it does a poor job doing so.
So is this something you have to do like a checkup once a year, or?
Kind of. So it's entirely dependent on the scenario, because just like many conditions, it is very unique to the individual involved. And so for hepatitis C, it's kind of this weird thing, because most people with hepatitis C tend to have another comorbidity. So they have some other condition that's also adding to the hepatitis C. And usually, and not all the time, but often, they are either related, or it could be what's called an extrahepatic manifestation. And so hepatitis C ends up triggering something. So a lot of folks with hepatitis C also experience Cryobolgenemia and rheumatoid arthritis, because what hepatitis C does is it actually hijacks your immune system and basically tricks your immune system into ignoring hepatitis C. And really, sometimes it also doesn't like other things that are happening. So sometimes it's like, I don't like that cell, and it sicks your immune system on other stuff, which is partially why the Cryobolgenemia and the rheumatoid arthritis come out. Like, I have the arthritis of like a 65-year-old, but I'm 35. So, it's fun stuff that just kind of happens with it.
Is this a disease similar to any other diseases, or Like, could you be misdiagnosed with something else, or?
In the past, yes, but because there's a definitive blood test, it's pretty obvious. So you could, if someone is experiencing just hepatitis, they'll run the test for all of them because the visual, symptoms, expression, how it works. You're looking at jaundice, so you're looking at the yellowing of the skin and eyes. You're looking at pruritus. You're looking at like itchiness, general itchiness that's just all over the body. You're looking at fatigue, easy bruising, edema. So you're looking at like skin swelling, ascites. And as the disease progresses, further, the symptoms become undeniable towards liver disease, not necessarily hepatitis, but liver disease. And so you do have to have confirmatory blood tests to really be able to tell you whether or not you actually have which version of hepatitis you might have.
So is it like a simple blood test, like you get your blood, you get your blood test for like all those categories. Is like something you can just check and you check right away, or is it like a special separate test?
So it is now a universally recommended test by the CDC and USPSTF, United States Preventative Services Task Force. So it is one of those general tests that they now throw into a lot of stuff. But how it works is they do two tests. It's a two-test sequence. They test for exposure with the hepatitis antibody test, and that will tell you whether or not someone has been exposed to that disease. And if that is a confirmatory that they say, yes, you have the antibodies, that means you probably have hepatitis, but it doesn't mean you do. It just means you've been exposed to it. So they then test for it with a PCR. Pardon me. They then test with a PCR test. And with the PCR test, they can determine basically if the person has hepatitis C using the viral load count. And so that viral load count tells them if they have hepatitis C. And so if that number is higher than 42, they have hepatitis C, which it often is if they generally had a positive antibody test. It's just like about a 30% chance. If you have antibodies, it's a 30% chance that you don't have hepatitis C. Because 25% of people who get hepatitis C just never develop it in terms of chronic.
Really?
We don't know why. We don't know.
Walking around with hepatitis and not knowing at all.
I mean, tons. On a worldwide scale, it's 9 out of 10. So 9 out of 10 folks with viral hepatitis are unaware of their status. Pardon me. And more importantly, when you look at, so viral hepatitis, if we look at it as a category, is about 300 million people worldwide. It's massive.
That's the size of the United States.
It is. Hepatitis C is about 70 to 90 million. So we're a smaller chunk. But that's still, the population of like maybe Germany and France. So that's the population of California.
That's a big chunk of people. It's not a rare disease. It's like a regular disease, I guess. Common. Yeah.
It's weird because when I was a kid, they were like, oh, we think this is a rare disease. And I was like, I don't think you think it is, because I don't think it is. It isn't, though. And then they kind of reassessed that and were like, it's not a rare disease at all. And I think it was that way because of insurance purposes more so than reality. As soon as we start really testing for something, we realize just how common that thing can be.
Well, I haven't followed hepatitis C, so you might be more familiar. But maybe, but there's a bad rep to hepatitis C. Because I mentioned earlier that you get it from needles, and you would think, oh, like hepatitis C is linked with drug addicts and such. But I don't think you're a drug addict. So do you think there was a big marketing change and like, oh, just a regular person, they can get it by accident even?
So needle stick is a very rare occurrence and typically only occurs in the healthcare industry. Needle stick is definitely a potential route, although it is highly unlikely unless you know that needle is infected with hepatitis. So that's really the only time that's really kind of going to random occur. But even then, it's not hugely confirmative because again, you have to think of it like a virus can only work in a situation. If you're only exposed to like a little bit of the virus, the chances of you getting it are very low in general. But
so what's the highest rate you can get it then? Like where did most people get hepatitis C then?
So currently, the biggest real reason in the United States why people get hepatitis C is typically through injection drug use. People who use injection drugs. That is the group that we tend to kind of have noticed it grow the most with. And millennials are actually the worst hit for a ton of reasons. There was a study in 2015 done actually where I live in San Diego, and they did it among people who use drugs who are under the age of 35. And what they asked them was, are you aware of your hepatitis status? Do you know if you have hepatitis C, et cetera, et cetera? And the disturbing thing was that this group is targeted by the CDC in terms of looking for hepatitis. So they test people regularly. So this group of folks would be more likely to know if they had hepatitis C. And still their knowledge of status was 30%, which is terrifying. Wow. The knowledge of status among baby boomers is about 62%. And the thing is, they were both campaigns the CDC ran for almost about 7 years. And so I kind of look at it as a really big misstep on the part of the CDC, and that they really should have said, they should have broadened it.
Why that could happen?
Why the gap? Well, the gap is pretty easy to figure out. We have a poor public health education infrastructure in the United States in general. So it's not easy for people to know about these conditions or diseases. Most people don't know about hepatitis C in the first place. So, especially not if you are on the kind of fringes of society, if you will, because there you only have access to whatever information, that's available there. Now with the internet, things have changed a lot, but still internet access is not as consistent as it may be for people who may have housing insecurity, which is common, unfortunately, among people who use injection drugs.
I feel like millennials would be more knowledgeable because they're exposed to so much information, and TikTok helps a lot, and the boomers are not as exposed. They like to watch TV. So I'm super surprised of that statistics.
Well, neat thing. So the hepatitis C treatments are really, for the most part, targeted towards boomers as well, because they're the people who are you can't get treated for something you don't know you have. And so all the advertising was also focused that way and so it creates this really big exponential effect, because all of the focus continues to go on this one group. And there was an experience called warehousing. And so up until 2013, all the treatments were really hard and had a 30% chance of success. So nobody did them. Remember the thing I told you inject yourself in the leg once a week and you might get better. And it's just terrible for 6 months, 30% chance of success. It is terrible. I nearly died twice doing one of these treatments, doing the Incivic treatment. It was terrible. I vomited blood profusely.
Is it because from the drugs or from the hepatitis?
It's from so what happens is the treatment itself puts your body in a state where it becomes easier for your symptoms to express in such a way that could be problematic. So in my case, I had what's called esophageal varices, and so with esophageal. In my case, I had esophageal varices. And so esophageal varices are basically enlarged veins in your throat. And in my case, because of the undue pressure that the treatment was causing, it created significant imbalances in my blood pressure. It exacerbated the existing imbalance and created the circumstances for me to basically bleed out 2 units of blood onto the ER floor, just out of my mouth onto the floor. But plus side, I was in the ER for it. So they just moved me right into a bed. I walked up, I was like, I need a puke bucket. And also we need to go in. And then I just vomited and they were like, well, we're taking you in. so I got to skip the whole line.
I mean, yeah, so I looked up research to do this, and it's often that if you have hepatitis C, you have to go to multiple rounds of treatment, right? Not
anymore. So in the past, that was the case, but the new treatments are significantly better. So we're talking about 95 to 98% effective, and they're also more targeted. So most people can find out either what genotype they have, or if they have any variants like myself, that might be what's called a resistant associated virus. And so RAVs are these specific unusual types of hepatitis C that are resistant to the methods of the treatment, because they target these non-structural proteins that are part of your liver cells, and they just kind of turn them off and on. And the problem is that they try to turn off one, but it just doesn't turn off. And so that's kind of how the RAVs kind of work.
So when did you receive your 3 rounds of treatment done?
So I received them in 2008, rather 2009, 2010, and then 2012. Those all failed. And then 2013, I did one, 2014. So 2013 and 2014 were the ones that are like the 90% cure rate that I don't have to inject myself with, that, don't have the myriad of symptoms that the other ones, their side effects, the other ones did. You don't get the riberates. You're not just angry at everything all the time. But these new ones, they basically, it was great. It was 8 weeks. I took them. They made everything brighter for a while, but other than that, they brought my numbers down and things looked good, but they didn't cure me because, again, I have this unusual strain that just isn't compliant. But new people, on the other hand, when they get tested, they can find out which one they have, and then they can get them the right treatment. As long as their insurance says it's okay.
So there's different types of hepatitis C, is what you're saying.
Yep. There are, I believe, 20 different subtypes.
Really?
There's I had genotype 1A. In the US, genotypes 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B are common. Genotype 3 is becoming more common, and genotype 3, 4 are usually more common in Europe. Genotypes 5, 6 are typically more common in Africa. But most new treatments, Epclusa, Merit, things like that, those guys right there are pangenomic. So they work on all of them, but they have a range of efficacy based on the treatment. So that's why it's always best to talk to your doctor and see which treatment will be best, because some treatments have like an 80% cure rate for your type, or another treatment might have a 95. And so it's always best to choose the one with the best percentage, and really your doctor can only advise that.
You were just born just like 2 years too early.
Well, I think I was, I think overall it was a pretty good timing, so,
so my question is about, it might not be relevant anymore, but why do you go to 3 rounds of treatment? Is it like a build up of, or did like one failed and you try a different drug, or?
They all failed. Each one, basically what they do is the goal is to get what's called sustained viral response. And so what that means is getting your number down to 0 and having it stay there for at least 12 weeks, hopefully 24. And what I was able to do on my first 2 treatments, my numbers were about 3 million, and they did not move. My third treatment, my numbers went from about 4.5 million, and they went all the way down to 286. And I was like, yes, we're going to get there. And then I bled out in the ER, and then I was like, maybe we won't. So it was a little tricky, but, I put a lot more into stuff. And the third treatment, on the other hand, that one was amazing. That one brought me from a viral count of like, I think 9 million down to, I want to say, I'm trying to remember. I think it got me to Sovaldi got me to like 200, 300. So it got me really, really close to 0, but didn't quite get me there. Harvoni, Harvoni actually got me to 0 during the treatment. So I was on a 24 weeks round of Harvoni, and it got me down to 0 on like week 18 or something. And I was 0 all the way until the end of treatment. And then suddenly I shoot up to like 700, and I'm like, crap. But I didn't know that, not for a little bit longer, but I didn't know that for
wait,
I know. They
measure the number?
Blood test. I had a biweekly blood test done. And actually that one I knew immediately. I'm mixing up my treatments a little bit. The fourth one is the one where I found out in the hospital when I had C. diff, which that was awkward.
It's crazy how like the body like helps you, but like destroys you, and then like helps you again.
Right. It's a wonky thing. Yeah. It's trying to stay alive, I guess, but like, maybe it doesn't always do a good job. It tries.
It's just like, what are all our body doing? Like who is the brains behind it?
Right. Well, I mean, technically everywhere, right? Every cell has its own kind of like mini brain, but it's not quite a real brain. They have a little bit of a thing.
Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I don't know if that's relevant or not, but
it actually is. The mitochondria itself there was a paper recently released that was talking about like panpsychism, the idea that like these mitochondrial cells actually have social lives. And I was like, what? Science is not busy enough. Like it was interesting.
It's not important. We need to cure the breast cancer or any cancer, not if they talk to each other. And
Well,
grade.
actually, it's an important thing to consider, because when we think about like gut microbiota and things like that, that's really where we're starting to really look at that communication components, because mitochondria are more specific. They're a bacterial cell inside you. So very interesting little thing. And so like that little guy, he's got more in common with the gut microbiota in your stomach than it does anything else in your cells.
It's just so weird how like one little virus could like shut you down.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean,
why did that happen though? Like, couldn't like the 99% like kill the 1% and like be done with it? Like the Clorox wipes to kill what 99.99%.
right. I mean, here's the thing: bleach is the cure to everything, but the cure is not. It's not the best kind of cure. You know what I mean?
I mean, didn't Donald Trump would like you to drink bleach or something?
Yeah, during the early days of the pandemic. Yeah, no, when he suggested that, I was like, that's not
someone
great.
actually did it.
Unfortunately, some folks did. Yeah, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, it was like horrible. Just had the president to just say that, even if he was joking. But like when you're the president, people
respect you and listen. It doesn't matter who you are.
Like, oh my God, like how can you say that?
Yeah, not the brightest moves. They did put a lot of messaging out afterward. They're like, please don't drink bleach. Which I know a lot of them. I'm familiar with some folks, and so I was a little surprised to see, a few people go up there and they're like, I can't believe I have to say this, but please don't drink bleach. And I get it. It's a weird thing to have to say, but at the end of the day, it's important that we have these types of safety out there, because we just don't want people to get hurt, right?
I mean, the only safety we have is stay away from children. Please don't drink on the bottle. But will anyone read that or even?
Well, I feel like it's a general consensus that bleach is not to be drinking. So that's good.
So anyone is listening, please do not drink bleach.
Please don't. It's definitely a way to go there.
Yeah, so I want to go back to, so you take the medicine so let's start with the 4th round, because that's the one that allowed you to talk to me today, which is awesome. So the 4th round, so you start taking the medicine. So is it a injection? Or is
it's a pill. I used to have one of them that I accidentally forgot to take along with me, but it's basically just a little pill. The new ones are just 1 pill a day. When actually after my transplant, my 6th treatment was the one that actually cured me. And that was a combination treatment of a bunch of different treatments that they would normally not combine. But because of my unusual scenario, we did it. And we did what's called an off-label treatment.
Did they know it was going to help you, or is it more like we think we know because since you're so unique?
I mean, I told them it would work. So I had done a bunch of the research myself, and I was like, okay, so these are the specific genes that I need to look for. These are the specific components. This is this one is, I can't take these treatments because they don't target the NS5B, they target the NS5A, which I'm sensitive to. So I was sensitive to 2. There are 4 keys. I was sensitive to 2 of those keys. So 2 of those keys aren't going to work. So I had to knock out all the treatments that use those. And so I had suggested a combination of Zepitir and Harvoni, and that I would do 8 weeks of Harvoni followed by 8 weeks of Zepitir, because this way we could order it without having it to be off label. However, my doctor decided that it would be easier if we just did it off label and we use Sovaldi and Zepitir instead. Sovaldi is Harvoni is actually a combination of Sovaldi and Lidipsavir, another drug. So instead we just took the component that would affect me, the NS3/4 component. So it would target the one of the good guys, and the other one targets the NS5B, which is the other one that I could target. So it was important that we used the combination there, but that was the one that ultimately we used. And and ultimately that was the one that was successful. And I found out September of 2017, which is about 18 years after my initial diagnosis.
Yeah, it's hard. I can't believe that you're the one how to tell your doctor how to cure you.
Well, to be fair, we're on the same page about it. So she was doing a lot of research herself, and she was going like, okay, what are these different things here? It's also very hard when I always tell people I'm a little unique for hepatitis C. And by a little unique, I mean incredibly unique. There are very few vertical transmissions. There are very few vertical transmissions who are also MPHs. There are also very few masters in public health. There are very few vertical transmissions who have gone through 6 treatments and a transplant. And so when I've had a handful of conversations with other folks who had vertical transmissions, typically they'll have one or two treatments, or they might have a transplant and a treatment. So the rare combinations of things here is very unique. And so when you're in a unique scenario, sometimes you have to do research yourself to really figure out what you need to do.
What kind of doctor do you go to?
So for hepatitis C, you can go to a hepatologist, you can go to your liver specialist, but that's really only for people with liver damage that's under F2. Because as soon as you get to F2, it is recommended that you either have, in addition to your hepatologist, that you have either an infectious disease specialist so that they're able to kind of look at your extrahepatic manifestations, or the best choice is a gastroenterologist. And that's what I've always gone with. And the main reason why I went very straight there very quickly was because of my extrahepatic manifestations and because I had so many other issues in my GI tract, which is why I had to do an upper endoscopy, basically like I had to do them 2 to 3 times a year, from 2011 until 2017, and then now I only have to do them every other year. So I don't mind it as much. So yeah.
So to go back, so you take the pill once a day. Is there you have to like prepare for it? Like, do you have to be like healthy to take it, or you just start taking it?
So with the original ones, with the old therapies, you had to prep for it and stuff. You had to make sure that it was a good time and things like that. The new treatments, to be honest, maybe the first day, give yourself a week. Give yourself a little bit of time, just because you don't know how you're going to respond to it necessarily. But other than that, like, you can just take it. Some of them you take with food, but that's really the only precaution. Most of the side effects are mild. They might enhance certain symptoms. So you might notice some people become a little more photosensitive. Some people might have their vision blur a little bit more, or become sharper, depending. It's weird. Or they might express some of the symptoms that did not express before.
What did you have?
For me, I experienced basically more photosensitivity. And so for me, just the light became significantly more obnoxious, which is already kind of challenging because my eyes are incredibly light. I have like light gray eyes. And so it's like, it's not, the world is already too bright. And so getting the photosensitivity, I was just like, I wore, like the shades they sell in like CVS that are like the wraparounds and stuff.
For the grannies.
Yeah. So I had a pair of sunglasses on, and then I put those on top of it. And I was like, this is fine. This is the world.
Wow,
this is okay.
You're that sensitive?
Well, because I needed the wraparounds to give myself protection on the sides. And the problem was, like focusing on something then only makes it harder because you're putting more energy on something. And because it's brighter, it's also harder. And so I would just put that extra layer on just to give myself precaution outside. Inside, I'd only have to wear the granny shades. So it wasn't so bad.
Well, no one knows, but you're into marketing, so you're on a computer a lot. So that must be hard to work.
At the time, I was, when I was in 2013, I actually was let go of my position, in part due to my disability and a bunch of other things that were happening, because I was just getting worse at the time. The hepatic encephalopathy was the most challenging part. So working at that time period was not really an option. So I was actually on disability during that entire time period. And so the only real work that I did do consulting work for the school district that I had worked for in the past. And so I went in and I just kind of helped them kind of fix up their work with kids and stuff, because that's what I'd done. I ran 6-6 programs. And before that, I'd just worked in them. And so I just kind of consulted. So they'd bring me in and just have me kind of help with stuff, or help them kind of fix up a program. But after that, I couldn't continue doing it anymore. Also because, being around kids all the time when you're in end stage isn't the best, because they're kind of filled with germs and kind of gross. They're always sick and getting each other sick and stuff. So this way I would kind of, give myself a little bit of buffer, but I couldn't really do that kind of work and stuff at the time. So now, I've had to have a huge shift in my job. So after my transplant, whatnot, I actually shifted to patient advocacy because I was doing so much work there. And then, my patient advocacy work expanded to the point where, I had done a lot of marketing and stuff because I was doing patient advocacy marketing, and before that, I had actually done web design and run a small basically a web design for small businesses. I did it for about 6 years. And then I stopped doing that because the recession killed my business. So, but I took that knowledge, translated it to patient advocacy. And now I also use it in my day job, which is I'm the director of education and outreach for a biopharma nonprofit.
I mean, you're doing a good job since I was able to find you.
I hope so. I try to be very findable, so that this way folks can really, if they have questions, they can do it. I don't get a lot of follows on Instagram because no one with Hep C really follows anybody because we try not to talk about it. Most people with Hep C do not talk about it. That's another reason why it's a silent disease. Yes, it is.
Why do you think that?
It's stigmatized. It's incredibly stigmatized. Most people, when they think hepatitis C, think, injection drug use. They think, dirty, gross. They also associate it with, sex as well. Sex is a big part of it too, because they think, you had unprotected, sex with somebody you shouldn't have or something like that. And like, that's how you got it. No, the rare instances of sexual transmission of hepatitis C occur when blood is transmitted. And so typically that happens through something like rough anal sex or something like that. So it is a rare instance, and it happens significantly more often if that person has HIV or hepatitis B, simply because their immune system is already compromised and more prone to being able to basically attract hepatitis C in that way. So those associations, create a stigma, and then society fosters it, continues to keep it going. Most mentions of hepatitis C in media generally are bad, and most people don't. If they personally talk about it, they generally, will be very minimal, if anything at all. Most of the folks that I know personally who have had hepatitis C do not talk about it with their family, do not talk about it with anybody else. They get it done, they walk out of it, and they just never talk about it again.
Well, that's the weird thing about your disease, is that you could have the disease but not have it anymore and kind of never have to talk about it again.
Yeah, now that can happen, and a lot of people do.
Yeah, so my question, so I want to talk about your transplant. How did that all come to be?
Oh man, that was a hell of a wait. So the transplant list in California was at the time when I had my transplant a mess. The way that they did it was incredibly unfair and biased against, a few regions in the East Coast who were able to get. So Meld Score is basically how bad you're doing. If your number is over 30, you're probably going to die in the next 3 to 6 months.
Wait, what's the Meld Score?
Meld Score is model for end-stage liver disease. And so that score is given to someone when they reach F4 and they have certain medically controllable side effects. So when you have esophageal varices, when you have extreme hepatic encephalopathy, which is when the ammonia breaches your blood-brain barrier and basically just gives you a almost like dementia-like brain fog. And then if you also have ascites or edema in usually the stomach is typically where it associates, but in my case, it actually did so in the legs. And so my legs basically swelled to 3 times their size. And I was just I had cankles all the time for a while. It was really awkward until they gave me diuretics and those got away. But yeah, so it was, forgot your original question because I just went into all the symptoms there.
So, but how?
Oh, so transplant. Yeah, sorry.
So you found someone that matched with you?
No.
Is a liver transplant easy? Like, do you have to have like similar blood types or anything like that, or just I could give you my liver and that's it, call it a day?
So it's a little complicated. So like I said, the Meld Score is how they rank people. So there is a living donor option. The living donor option is very complicated and can only occur in some people. So people who can take a partial liver can do that. I was very,
Wait, are we talking about you specifically, or are we talking about everyone?
This is everyone in general. So me specifically, my liver was damaged to such an extent that I could not have a partial transplant. So I could only have what's called a cadaver or full liver. And that meant that basically somebody had to die for me to be able to get a transplant. Liver, you can do a living transplant. That's what unfortunately my aunt had a bout of incredible hepatitis and had to have a liver transplant, but she was able to have a living transplant from my cousin. And they managed to do that at the beginning of the year, and they're both living and happy and successful now. But for me, it was a little more complicated because my Meld score is basically your ticket to getting a transplant. And in California at the time, in order to get a transplant, I needed to have a Meld score of basically between 28 and about 36. That was generally when people got it. For reference, my average Meld score in 2011 was about 15. 2012 was about 18. 2013 was about 22. 2014, I had about 28. 2015, I was just chilling in the 30s, chilling in the high 20s and 30s. And then 2016, I was deep in the 30s, occasionally hanging out in the high 20s when I had a good day. I was so jaundiced in 2016 that my eyes were golden yellow at all times. And so when I went to the I remember one time I went to the supermarket, and I parked because I have a handicap placard, and I parked in a handicap spot, and this lady just started yelling at me for parking in the spot, because I walk around, there's I got out of my car, clearly there's nothing wrong with me, and so she just kind of does that, and I just take off my sunglasses, and from 30 feet away she could see the yellow of my eyes, and she just shut up and turned away, because she's just like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not interested in this. I don't know what's happening. I could be, he's demon possessed or something. I'm not interested. I was like, that's fine. Whatever gets you away from me. Yeah. Cause it's a weird thing. And what I've noticed is that when something affects our face, especially our eyes, people really freak out. That's what I've noticed. People just freak out, man. They're just like, I don't know what's happening, because they just don't know where to put it. It's not something that's common, unless you're like funky contacts or something, mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it was trippy, but yeah. So I had my transplant occurred, in December of 2016, and my Meld score at the time was about 33, 34.
So you have gotten a full liver transplant, but a part before then, or how come you didn't get it?
I was on the transplant list, and I was on the transplant list from 20, basically once you receive a Meld score, I was put on the pre-list before that. So 2011, I was put on the pre-list. So basically they did all the tests and stuff, and were basically just readying me for the list because they knew I would inevitably need it. And then they did them again, in 2013. So 2013 did the tests again. And that's when they said, okay, we're going to start giving you liver offers from now on. You're going to get calls. All of the calls that I got were for liver transplants with hepatitis C, which, because I already have a variant strain, would have been a bigger gamble. So getting a full liver transplant during, because I received 2 phone calls in 2013, late 2013, and in late 2014.
Wait, the people would actually call you, or the doctor?
That's how it works. Basically, when you're on a liver transplant list, you live next to your phone, and you never move from wherever you're listed. Wherever you're listed is where you live, and you will never go anywhere from there until you get your transplant. You are tied to it, because the second that phone rings, you have 24 hours, because the liver only has such long viability. And so how it works is, if you don't respond, it will go to the next person on the list. And so for me, I live by my phone. And so when I got that phone call, it was because I've gotten it many a time, because when you're not number one, if you're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everyone goes. The top 6 or 7 people, everyone goes every time there's a new liver available. And the reason why is because, like you were saying earlier, blood type. So what happens is, when they look at the new liver, they have to look at everybody on the list and go, okay, who has the blood type matches? And then size is actually an issue too, because if you think about people, we're all different sizes. And so a friend of mine, she always jokes that she got this big guy's liver, because she's like 5'4", 5'5". And she ended up getting this guy's liver who's like 6 foot something. So she's got a little bit of a bulge there, because the liver is a little bit larger. But in some cases, in some cases they can't quite fit or something, and so they just go with another person. And so size actually can become an issue.
I mean, I'm not.
No. You wouldn't generally want to do that, because if, as much as you cannot mutilate the organ, you want to avoid it, because if you do, you risk reducing the functionality, and you risk increasing the risk of rejection of the organ.
Oh my
because
God.
you have to take autoimmune. You have to take medication that basically reduces your active immune, your innate immune system, because your innate immune system is going to attack your organ if it doesn't think it's okay, and so you have to turn it off. Yeah.
So you get a phone call and someone just say, "Hey, I have a liver for you."
Pretty much, yeah. And then from then on, they basically go, "Okay, we're going to get you set up." They take you into the room, they get you prepped. Yeah, and how it works is I basically have to have someone drive me, because obviously I can't drive back, if there's a transplant. So I have to have someone drive me there. And then I get prepped. And what that does is they, trying to remember the specific, chlorhexidine. So what you have to do is you actually have to do a full chlorhexidine wash. And so they give you this big old thing. They take you to a room where you can shower and clean. You have to completely clean with the chlorhexidine. Then once you have that, you then kind of gown up and you wait for however long it is. And eventually, if you get a transplant, a surgeon will meet you and they will tell you what the next steps are. And typically the next steps are, all right, we're going to, put this tube on you here. We're going to put some stuff. We're going to put a few apparatuses in your mouth and stuff. And then you're basically going to fall asleep, wake up in about 8 hours, and you will smell and everything will taste terrible, but you'll be alive. And so that's kind of what happened for me, is that because I had 6 times where before my transplant where I was called in and I got to wait there for like between 4 and 8 hours, where I just sit in a chair and you just wait to find out. Multiple times where that occurred, I was actually already in the hospital. So it was convenient. So at least there's that. I was in the hospital for sepsis one time, so I was chilling there for a bit. That also bumped my Meld score up quite a bit. I was up at 38 at that point. I don't recommend sepsis. It's not pleasant. But thankfully there are a lot of good treatments for it, and they caught it very early because I was very attentive. At the time I looked very pregnant. They pulled 12 pounds of fluid from my stomach, and that's where they found the sepsis.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I was on a Mexican cruise for a bit because my mom was like, let's go on a cruise because you're dying and everything sucks. And I was like, sure. Because I had hepatic encephalopathy and didn't know any better, so, but yeah, no, it was,
what are you waiting in the room for? You said 4 to 8 hours. What are you waiting for?
4 to 8 hours. So what you're waiting for is a confirmation that you will be the person with the liver transplant. So like I said before, there's a list of people. And so they're going to go through that list of people from the top and go, okay, can this person have the liver? Yes, no, we're good. No, if no, they go to the next person. If no, they go to the next person. They keep going down that list until they hit a person.
Tell you like before you go to the hospital?
Nope. They won't know. In fact, sometimes they don't even know until really like it's there. It's a very hard decision because it's usually about a pool of between 8 and 10 people, depending upon the circumstance. And they're going to go, okay, so who's the best fit? Because they're all at the top of the Meld score. So who's the best fit for the scenario? Who's going to fit this situation the best? And who is the most important that we want to target? Then we go through and put it in. And there are a lot of factors involved. And if somebody is drinking alcohol, they may not even be on the list. Different states have rules regarding alcohol consumption and liver transplantation, even if it wasn't even the cause. And it's really a moral thing than a kind of, because you think about it more like, well, they were drinking, so they shouldn't get a transplant, right? But like, if they're just having a drink, like that's not, and it's not the cause of their liver disease that caused the need for a transplant. It's kind of weird, right?
So you get the transplant. So like what happens after? Like you take, and then you mentioned you take medicine so it doesn't reject you.
Yeah.
And then
I take tacrolimus and Prograf, and so what those do is those act as immunosuppressants, and so those reduce my innate immune system So but thankfully I have a relatively strong adaptive immune system because I worked with kids for 10 years. So,
So like you take your medicine and then you stop taking it after how long?
You don't ever. Some people do. It is rare, but some folks are able to actually, taper down the medication and no longer need it.
Wait,
Unfortunately,
so your body could reject your liver at any moment, is what you're saying?
yeah, that is correct. Yes. Although it is highly unlikely to do so, because I am on immunosuppressants. However, I am on a high dosage of them, and they do have side effects at the end of the day. And so for me, the tacrolimus creates the issue of it is slowly causing kidney damage. And so at some point it will cause damage to my kidneys. So, what's good for the liver is bad for the kidney in this case.
Yeah, I have to do a podcast after that happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully I don't have to worry about my second transplant. Some folks do need a second transplant. Some folks need a third, some folks need a fifth. Some folks have situations where the first one doesn't take well, and it could take 6-7 months, and they could go through 2 or 3 different livers until they actually get to a one where it actually takes. There are all kinds of situations. I was very, very lucky in that my treatment, my liver transplant, not only the transplant process, the surgery was so quick. It was only 5 hours. I was very, very quick. I was only in the hospital for 3 days, and I was out. I mean, I came back for a day later because, it turns out when you have low blood levels and you take multiple oxy, you get confused. So, who knew, right? So
like to wrap this all up, I mean, so are you more prone to get sick now?
Absolutely. Which is the reason why I can't work with kids anymore. So
the whole COVID must be scary for you.
It absolutely is. Thankfully, I was able to get the vaccine, and it does seem to have good outcomes. But I'm also an MPH. My master in public health was actually focused on COVID-19 as well as hepatitis C and Ebola. And so I really do focus a lot on pandemics, epidemics, and infectious diseases.
So like when the world closed, you were like, yes.
I mean, not really. I was like, not again, because like I had just spent years in this state. Because as soon as I was was on disability, I was just chilling at home like 90%, because like I couldn't really do much. I couldn't afford to do anything, and I was too sick to really do a lot of stuff, and too lethargic. So like it was just kind of a throwback. I was like, well, at least I know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a similar situation too, and it's kind of I wouldn't say it's nice, but it's nice for able-bodied people to know how we felt when we couldn't leave the house. It
was weird. Having that camaraderie with, I don't know, I don't know what to call normies. I don't know I don't know. Like, that's not the right either. But people who don't have to worry about chronic disease.
That's a bit. I mean, it's a little bit different because it's a bit pandemic. Everyone was inside, so it's kind of like you weren't missing out that much. But when you're inside and you see on Instagram or TV, everyone's having fun, and you can't for whatever reason. It's like sad. But when everyone's together being miserable, it doesn't have the same effect.
It's weirder, but I don't know. I mean, I've always found solace in my online communities. So like for me, Instagram, especially in like 2015, 2016, was kind of my window to the world. And so like, it's how I reached out to people. I was a moderator for Health Union for a while. I wrote a lot of articles for Health Union. So I made a lot of, friends with hepatitis C through Facebook, through all these digital communities. And so really that's kind of a lot of the spaces I lived in. And so, I mean, yeah, a lot of similarities for sure, but I don't know. I think the benefit back kind of pre-COVID was that, it was like our little communities, we were like little micro communities, and now it's suddenly like everybody, and like all the problems that we had in those little communities are suddenly the same problems everyone's experiencing. And they're like, where did all these problems come from? And I'm like, they've been here. You just didn't notice.
Okay. So we're going to wrap this up before I take the mic away. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to advertise or anything you want to say?
Sure. Yeah. So with hepatitis, here's the thing. Most people don't know they have it. So it's best to get tested and, talk to your friends, and make sure they get tested too. And remember, it's actually it's a lot more common than we think. And as a whole, I just want to do a little bit of shout out just for harm reduction practices. If you really want to learn a lot about hepatitis C and more about harm reduction practices, there is the National Viral Hepatitis Roundtable, nvhr.org, as well as my website. But there are also really great places for harm reduction. The National Council for Drug Policy, a lot of organizations that work with people who use drugs because it is affecting a large part of our community. It is a very important movement, and I do highly recommend looking into more about harm reduction because it will be a very big talking point over the coming years.
Yeah, and then anyone that wants to talk to someone that had hepatitis C, to hit up Rick Nash and he'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on and talking about hepatitis C. It's a great conversation. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and I'll catch you in the next time. Bye-bye.